Do the signature weapons of Marvel's superhero universe define who the characters actually are?
Wait, I'm sorry, I didn't time that right.
Intriguing question.
Now!
Superheroes tend to come with their signature weapons. It's one of the essential defining characteristics associated with being a superhero, right alongside having a costume and a secret identity and a movie franchise. In fact, a lot of superheroes aren't even particularly super without their gear or suits or bows and arrows or eyes of Agamotto or what have you. For many heroes, their main tool is part of their iconography, a symbol that can stand in for the heroes themselves. Batman throws batarangs in his familiar bat shape. But even more crucially, these weapons give us insight into who these heroes are as people, their causes, their outlooks on the world, and even their personalities.
He's a Batman, so you're fast.
Captain America isn't aggressive. He defends his homeland. So he memorably carries a shield. Yondu from Guardians of the Galaxy is the unquestioned absolute ruler of the Ravagers and demonstrates his authority by wielding a flying arrow that he can control just by whistling. T'Challa hides and protects his homeland from the outside world, and he wears a suit that weaponizes incoming damage, turning any offensive move back into his enemies. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, and particularly the recent Infinity War installment, adds a significant and provocative twist to this long and storied tradition, showing us a group of heroes who have physically bonded or merged with their weapons. These are not just stories about heroes rushing into battle and grabbing whatever they can on the way, but warriors who bear the marks of past violent experiences and whose bodies have been forever changed by their struggles. Let's look at two key examples. Consider where the entire MCU franchise began, 2008's Iron Man. Tony Stark's world-saving supersuit only came to be because he was left in a cave in Afghanistan to die with shrapnel in his heart. The helpful Yinsen was forced to modify his body in order to save his life, and this procedure inspired the arc reactor, which in turn makes the Iron Man suit possible. So Tony's weapon wouldn't even exist if he hadn't had the immediate physical need for it. It was born out of his life-threatening experience in the desert. Jumping 10 years ahead to Thor's role in Infinity War, he spends nearly the entire movie pursuing a replacement weapon as his mighty hammer, Mjolnir, was destroyed by his sister Hela in Ragnarok. After withstanding the full power of a neutron star in order to fashion his new axe, Thor nearly dies. He's only resurrected when his new weapon is completed, essentially channeling his thunder and lightning life force through Stormbreaker.
Ready?
As if that weren't on the nose enough, the axe's handle comes from the body of his fellow superhero Groot, who excruciatingly uses one of his own limbs to piece together two red-hot chunks of space steel. This is a weapon fashioned out of an immediate and desperate physical need that requires a character to painfully amputate their own limb to bring it into existence.
So cool.
So what are the filmmakers saying with sequences and moments like this? Why are all of these characters, and many more, so closely, even biologically tied to their tools? On one level, we can read this relationship as reflecting the hero's sense of duty. These characters have accepted their roles as protectors and taken on a great responsibility to the world, which they cannot easily leave behind. Many superhero films ponder this same question about whether it's acceptable for a hero to hang it up, even after they've made great sacrifices on the world's behalf. Basically, every Spider-Man movie has touched on this theme in some way or another, even before Peter was in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Why would I tell him about the churro?
Many of these characters, in one way or another, are stuck being Avengers, whether they want to or not. Perhaps the most clear example of this theme in Infinity War concerns Vision and Scarlet Witch. When we first meet up with them, they're hiding out in Scotland and actually discussing the fact that they'd prefer to stay there forever, as just normal folks, rather than returning to their world-saving Avenger jobs. The discussion is only interrupted, and the decision to remain as heroes made and confirmed when the duo are attacked by Thanos' children, who want Vision's Infinity Stone for their own. Just as Vision can't remove the stone from his head without killing himself, he can't remove superhero or Avenger from his personal identity. They are one and the same. Infinity War opens up with Tony Stark revealing to his girlfriend, Pepper Potts, that he reinstalled the old mechanical plate on his chest, now filling it with super helpful nanotechnology. This upsets Pepper, not just because it's dangerous, but because of what it represents for them and their relationship. Tony is always going to be Iron Man. It is a part of him. Iron Man's segments are fused into his body. He'll never just be able to retire with her and raise a family. He's part weapon now, and always will be. Bruce Banner's journey since the MCU's inception has been about coming to terms with the fact that a monster, his weapon of choice, shares a body with him, and apparently always will. The 2008 Incredible Hulk film dealt with Banner's radical attempt to extract the Hulk's essence from within him, but it didn't work, and ended up causing more destruction and even additional monsters to fight. By the time we reach Infinity War, the Hulk remains out of control, but in a different way. Now, he refuses to come out, leaving Banner impotent and helpless. In both cases, Banner is saddled with a heavy and inescapable burden, a weapon living within him that's not entirely under his control. This notion of an evil hidden deep within an otherwise normal or heroic figure runs through a lot of classic horror movies as well. More terrifying than any kind of conventional monster, your ghost or vampires or zombies, is the notion of an evil arising from inside of you that you can't ever fully part with, defeat, or extinguish without killing yourself in the process. David Cronenberg deals with this theme a lot in his classic movies, including The Fly and Videodrome. But it pops up in movies pretty regularly. Alex Garland's Annihilation explored some similar ideas about human bodies rendered foreign or unrecognizable by an outside invader. Body horror reflects the real-world fears or illnesses, like cancer, most obviously, but also general uneasiness about our own bodies and all the myriad of things that can go wrong with them. We're all walking around with organs and blood and viscera all day, and though we don't like to think about it, we're all aware that at any moment, something could go wrong in there and kill you. So it makes sense that stories about superheroes, characters whose bodies develop and change in all sorts of unnatural ways, would touch on these themes too. 2008's Incredible Hulk not only introduces us to Bruce Banner's radiation-inspired transformation, but also Emil Blonsky's horrific metamorphosis into the Abomination. We're presented with a villain who's all the more unknowable and inscrutable as a result. What human being would choose to turn themselves into something so grotesque? In Black Panther, T'Challa ingests the heart-shaped herb, which painfully strips his superpowers away. We're reminded that his powers are not truly his, but live within him, and can be taken away from him, rendering him impotent and weak. The character of Spider-Man also speaks directly to these themes. Peter Parker is a young man who actually started to change into a spider, or at least take on some of the aspects of spiderdom. Thematically, this frequently lends itself to puberty analogies. The physical changes that come with adolescence can resemble a metamorphosis into an entirely different type of creature. But in addition to these individual themes, all these stories speak to our collective fear of our internal capacity for violence. Many Marvel Cinematic Universe characters have developed massive, overwhelming powers that can in fact be terrifying when it's fully displayed. This is what sends Hulk away from Earth at the end of Age of Ultron, fear of his own destructiveness. Scarlet Witch 2 has dealt with the trauma of seeing her own powers used for terrible deeds, like destroying populated office buildings. Thor, as well, recently confronted the ways his family's powers could be used for evil and to wreak destruction on the universe. He paid a terrible price for his father's brutality, witnessing the downfall of Asgard and the decimation of his people. Ultimately, we are all mysteries to ourselves, and we can't know what we're actually capable of. Superheroes give us a way to work through that idea. They literally don't know what amazing, awesome, super feats they are capable of. Their bodies are mysteries that they spend entire films slowly and deliberately solving. On another level, a bunch of characters walking around with weapons attached to their person can be seen as symbolic of the lasting, permanent impact of their violence and traumatic past experiences. Many of these characters receive their weapons and powers as a result of brutality or suffering, which can make them both a saving grace and a burden. We learn in Avengers Age of Ultron that siblings Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver gained their remarkable abilities only after undergoing brutal Hydra experiments overseen by the cruel Wolfgang von Strucker. Also consider the nature of Scarlet Witch's power. She can enter other people's minds and cause them to face their fears or relive past traumas.
I have no place in the world.
Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier, carries around one of the most clearly obvious living weapons of any MCU character, the mechanical arm. He received his arm along with, you guessed it, torturous Hydra brainwashing and reprogramming. Just as his brain was rewired by the evil organization, his body was permanently altered to suit their needs. He's been compromised both outside and in. When he loses the metal arm, and later receives the gift of a vibranium replacement from his friends in Wakanda, his entire demeanor and personality seems to shift. He's free of both Hydra gear and the Hydra mindset. Then there's the sad backstory of Rocket Raccoon, who gained intelligence after being genetically and cybernetically enhanced and horrifically abused in a lab for many years. It's made clear that Rocket's never come to terms with his experiences and what happened to him. He's haunted by his past and carries it around with him, just like his massive, oversized guns. Rocket's also fixated on stealing other people's body parts and augmentations throughout the franchise. In Infinity War, he provides Thor with a stolen eyeball and offers money to the Winter Soldier in exchange for his new arm. Despite his hatred of what was done to him, he's nonetheless internalized it and seeking to continue augmenting himself. Finally, when you're talking about weapons and powers obtained through massive bodily trauma, you have to talk about Dr. Stephen Strange. He was only motivated to visit the mystical, forbidden realm of Kamartaj and become the Sorcerer Supreme in the first place because he was in a horrible car accident and shattered both of his surgeon hands. His magical abilities, we're told, don't even actually allow him to heal his own hands. They're more of a workaround. By using magic, he can avoid having to use his shattered hands for any sort of precise work. But he's still walking around forever with broken hands. The movie Doctor Strange goes out of its way to specifically make this point to us. Fellow sorcerer Jonathan Pangborg uses his magic to walk despite paralysis, but he's stripped of this ability after a visit from Mordo and resumes being paralyzed. He had never actually healed. These characters have been through trauma, and they have witnessed and even caused horrific violence. Perhaps these movies are saying that rather than turning into villains or crumbling under the weight of their decisions, they have made a conscious choice to become heroes. Their sacrifices are all the more significant because of what it does to them and their bodies, and because it's essentially irreversible. Now, there is one MCU villain who also seems to reflect this same theme: Thanos. Most obviously, his arc in Infinity War centers on a wearable weapon that comes to serve as an icon not only for himself, but his mission. The Infinity Gauntlet will allow him to fulfill his destiny through a simple physical act, the snapping of his fingers. However, let's reconsider Loki's dying act as he's telling Thanos off. Facing his own likely end, Loki tells Thanos that even though it appears that controlling all the Infinity Stones will permanently change who he is, in fact, Loki essentially reverses the notion we've been discussing all along. He says that despite Thanos' harrowing backstory and the fact that he'll soon be wielding an ultimate weapon, it will not alter his essence. He won't ever truly merge with it and will remain mortal. As the rest of the film is from Thanos' perspective, it basically spends 2.5 hours refuting Loki's premise, showing us his incredible godlike power and the total inability of all the collected Avengers to stop him. One entire sequence concerns several of Earth's mightiest heroes failing to pull the glove off of Thanos' hands. Infinity War seems to confirm heroes and villains are their weapons, and their weapons become a fixed part of their being. But perhaps Part 4 will reverse all of this. We'll just have to wait and see. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to Gamma Ray, like Gamma Ray, do all the Gamma Ray things, and tell us, are there any heroes we missed that's weapons come from trauma? Tell us in the comments. Bada bing, bada boom. We'd like to debate you. Hot takes.